Edith Yeung is a general partner at Race Capital, an early-stage VC firm in Silicon Valley, technology executive, creator of the China Internet Report and Silicon News. Selected as one of the 10 most powerful investors in crypto by The Information, Edith is a seed investor in Solana, FTX, Lightning Network, and many other amazing companies. She frequently speaks on crypto, China and Silicon Valley technology, and investment landscape.
Welcome, Edith. So good to have you. Let's talk about first your time at Race Capital. What made you join the firm?
So my partner Chris, Alfred, and I started Race Capital in 2019. And before Race Capital, I spent many years at a 500 startup. I was a solo GP there of a fund called 500 Mobile Collective. And Chris McCann and Alfred Chung, my partners now, they were both advisors for my previous fund. And so yeah, we started Race Capital because during the days in a 500 startup, I very fortunate in January 2018 got the chance to invest in a project called Solana.
So before we get into a little bit more of your overall background and how you got to be where you are today and as successful as you are, what do you think about the current state of crypto? I know a lot of people are kind of freaked out about the crypto winter. What do you think?
I would say the current state of crypto is a warm winter. It's definitely a winter, but it's not as cold. But to put things into perspective, in 2018, the combined crypto market cap was about 400 billion. In the height of 2021 was 2 trillion. Today, before I came over to see you, Sarah, it was about 1 trillion. So it's still almost three times compared to 2018. So in some sense, it's not a bad thing because I think longer term, what we want to focus on is not about trading or crazy strategy. It's really about the technology. And it is still very early. So I'm actually excited about the possibility. At the same time, just being very pragmatic about, this is a winter and we probably need to hang in tight for a little while.
So let's get back to how we get out of the crypto winter in a minute. But going back to before you were at Race Capital, even before 500 Startups, where did you earn your chops? Where did you decide that this was kind of the path for you?
I started my career as an engineer. I spent 10 years mostly enterprise software, worked on Siebel, Oracle, Autodesk. I hate to admit it, but I actually started my career in Web 1, very old school.
Why do you hate to admit that?
Yeah, well, because many of my young
not
founders,
sexy or whatever.
but it's all good. I sort of looking back, I think it's so interesting to sort of to see the growth of the internet. And for me, so like starting as an engineer, I really sort of enjoy the fact that, particularly when Web3 and crypto is so early, so almost at least for Race Capital, what we focus on is infrastructure investing. Means most of our founders, their customers are developers. So it's sort of back to our root where, on a day-to-day basis, most of the conversation that we have are how do you actually develop the developer community? How do you actually get people to build on top of your protocol? And that sort of techniques and thinking actually haven't really changed because at the end of the day, because we're so focused on developers, either your code work or you don't. Like you can't sort of brand or package it looks nicer.
Yeah.
And it's very practical, and we really love that. And from Web 1, 2, and now 3, I'm not saying Web 1 or 2 are going away or disappear, but developers have a certain bar, and that bar is getting higher and higher, and it's just really refreshing to see. The whole concept of Web3 is really about, be able to flatten the curve. So our data or all these things is not controlled by the crazy platform like Meta or Google or Amazon.
Well, speaking of large platforms, when you work with developers, founders, early stage companies that you feel like can contribute really well to the Web3 future, what do you look for?
So many things, and I think for us, because we're so early, many of them may written a little bit of code, but there's really not much. They definitely don't make any money. They have no revenue.
Yeah. But how do they stand out to you then?
The key thing is really about like sort of founder market fit and founder investor fit. And it's really so much about the person. And when you talk to somebody, you've a few things. One is you feel like this person, first of all, have really deep understanding what they're building. And most of them, because they're engineers, you don't really need, these days especially, when you wanted to start just writing code. So a lot of times when we talk to them, we actually will check out their work on GitHub, probably test them on the code before we even talk to them. And then many of them, we love people who are very execution oriented. Sometimes you don't need to launch yet, but the ones who are really into what they do, either they're already a user themselves.
But they see.
They understand. They're not never the type of people that create a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
They really understand like the pain points. So they're creating their own painkiller. So when we talk to them, we can feel that they're building something that they care a lot about, and very likely they're the first user of what they're building. And usually we learn a lot from the individual because they usually will teach us something. You know, one thing which I found so fascinating, especially in the downturn, in the last few months, we invested in 2 founders from Facebook, 1 founder from Square, 1 founder from Adobe. These are all big platforms, and they're giving up their $1 million pay whatever they get paid package, and
Probably a lot.
Yeah, probably a lot, and willing to give that up because they felt like they want to right a wrong. And you can sort of feel that energy. So that sort of the type of character and sort of the persona that we look for.
You can smell it, I guess.
Yeah, and honestly, on the reverse, we can also smell sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I think.
I know where you're going.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Like founders sometimes, particularly in Silicon Valley and Sarah, I'm sure that you met many of them, where they will tell me about, now I'm, and don't get me wrong, I think raising money is part of the journey.
Sure.
But it's never about the money that you raise, it's about really like the product, how many people that you get impacted, how many users, what is it, your traction in terms of adoption. Those are actually the true KPI. When you're building a product in a company.
That was kind of going to be my next question, is having come from a person who has worked with investors, now being an investor yourself, how do you try to weed out I guess that's a little dramatic, but the folks who may have a trajectory where there's a lot of money being raised, there's a lot of buzz, but you don't really see the company going anywhere.
Yeah, I think this particular downturn is a reflection of that, right? So in the last few years, everybody gets so proud of, now I'm worth how many gazillion billion. But once you get listed on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, or now in the crypto market, and many of the public IPO actually down 50, 80% in the last 12 months. So in many senses, I think what we should really drive the culture for Silicon Valley longer term, crypto or not crypto, is really the real KPI. It's not just about valuation and how much, because sometimes, we have seen some bad example from the WeWork or the Uber. Having so much funding actually sometimes may not be the best for longer term growth for companies.
Indeed.
Yeah, so for us is, it's refreshing to get to meet founders where they're very pragmatic, and it's never about them. As you said, like, what are some of the, red flags on folks is, sometimes when you talk to founders, they always just talk about themselves. Building a company is never about you or the founder. It's actually about the user, your partners, your team, or overall market. And the founders who are really into what they're building, even of course everybody have their own ego, which is fine, but
you kind of need it
to
work at the scale.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be the type of person you get bullied. And and for myself as a women investor and founder, sometimes I have to like sort of psych myself up that okay, I'm ready for this, because usually I definitely don't see that in my male colleague where they're always right and they're like selling the world, and I'm like, the world doesn't look like that. But I do think that we need to sort of, especially with the time now, being in a downturn is be realistic about what we're building and kind of go back down to earth on, okay, what our user really want and building something that matters rather than just talking about I'm, raise X dollars or I'm worth this much. And that's not really like what we should focus on. We should keep on focus on building.
Now, I know you are well respected in your firm, and in the past, did you feel like you had a harder time hearing your voice heard by others, particularly if you were working with a male founder, for example, or working with a founder, from another country that didn't necessarily understand where you were coming from?
I think that I never thought about that way until I think as I start noticing how come most of my colleagues are guys, are dudes, and yes, you definitely don't see. Sarah, I love to see more female founders, and I'm excited to be here because Tammy is a female founder.
Absolutely.
And Stronghold is doing really great.
Yeah.
So in many sense, I think I less so because I happen to be female. I always think that way, but I do see as I'm like growing as an investor and somebody in tech, I do see the different in terms of the confidence level, and the more similar, people that you see, you're like, oh yeah, I'm in a community, and certainly I think, particularly I think in the crypto, in Web3, really many amazing young male founders.
Sure. Sure.
Not as many of female founders, and we need more. So we should definitely help and support and get more, women founders and engineers that get educated and speak up, and it was all the same.
And I think female everyone have been saying this for years. We need more engineers. We need more, girls to care about math. We need women to not think that they belong in a certain role in a company rather than some integral role that most of their male peers have already taken.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, how do we fix this? Besides kind of tweeting out, into the ether, yes, we believe that women should do everything. Like, what do we do to change it?
Yeah, I think I'm addressing your question, but at the same time, also kind of look at like the tech community and most of the startup in terms of the most critical role.
Yes.
I think the most critical being a founder is usually start with you're an engineer, but you're very strong in product. Or you're very strong in sales, and missing one of these is more of super critical. So I think for us, it's less so. I'm sure, like if I happen to be engineer, which is fine, but the key thing is about being super confident on like your contribution to the company. So in addition to Tammy, who's very very strong female leader, we also invested in. Elizabeth Stark, who is the founder of Lightning Network. She's very, very strong and definitely the opinion leader in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And Lightning is all about scalability solution for Bitcoin. She's very, very strong voice, and that doesn't matter like you're male or female. I think in addition to that, we invested in Reluka Ada Papa. She's the founder CEO of Pig. Is most infrastructure, less so on crypto, is all about encrypted data analytics. And both of them are just very strong in the product they're building. No one can bullshit them. And so have a lot to do with, if we pick a field, go deep. We don't necessarily have to, why don't we complement another? Forget that. We can take charge.
Sure.
And I think have a lot to do with our psyche. And once you believe that you can do, then you can attract a team. And it's less so about male or female, it's more or less it's just that, be very realistic and pragmatic about, I'm super good at this.
Yeah.
And you need to follow me. And that sort of leadership is sometimes, we need to sort of practice more.
Oh, yeah. I think for a lot of people it sounds kind of scary. Or are they going to follow me? Am I the leader? But certain people kind of have that inherentness inside them.
I think it's actually very scary for the guys too. It's just that they're better at
totally.
fake it till you
Yeah.
make it. but they're actually deep down pretty scared. But they just don't say it.
Better at faking it.
Yeah.
Better at faking it. So let's talk a little bit about being in a VC role, and I know that from I'm a tech reporter, so we talk about all things VC all the time, but I don't really know what that's like. I also don't really know what it's like to be a founder or an engineer, at a company that's trying to build something. What do you think is kind of the secret sauce to having a VC team that works together, where everybody kind of has their own roles?
Yeah.
Because it's like you're no longer really an engineer, even though you can take a lot of engineering questions.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that at Race?
I think first and foremost, I loved them. So Race Capital, the way we built Race Capital, we're very proud of ourselves that we run like a software company. We have daily scrum. We get together, powwow for half an hour every day to talk about things new companies that we met, things that we learned. It's so fun. And because we do, you definitely don't want it to code anymore, but we do have engineering on staff. So when we look at the protocol, we look at GitHub, we test the code, we need engineers to be on staff. So because of that, and then I actually think that the motion of being an investor is actually quite similar to a journalist. Because, you have to tell me. And in many senses, it's about like digging through things where
Sure.
I have to dig through,
Picking out what's important,
Yep.
and where to go from there.
and find clue. Because when I talk to someone, everyone wanted to tell us like the best story
Yeah.
and just all the good stuff. Sometimes as an investor and the relationship with building,
You want to
the
hear the
founder,
bad stories.
Yeah, and okay, this bad things happen, and how did you deal with it?
Sure.
And in fact, why did it happen? What did you learn from it? And it's actually okay, and that's why sometimes I actually love investing in female founders. They're a lot more comfortable being vulnerable.
Sure.
And in fact, for us, we would rather you tell us the bad stuff so we know this is what happened, this is how you dealt with it.
And how you overcame it.
Yeah, and that make you such a more stronger character and a founder, because for a while crypto was doing so amazing, everything just so easy.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. And the ones that can sort of withstand this downturn are the ones that we really should be investing in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the fact that we are being very open-minded, and because it's early stage, we're there with you. We're all founders ourselves before. We just enjoy building. So we don't want any of our founders to feel like we're investor. We're building it with you.
Partners.
We're partners.
Yeah.
And we're your friends.
On the
confidant.
team. On the same team.
That's right.
So going back to just kind of the state of crypto today, sure, we're in a crypto winter. There's a downturn, as you've said, that can be advantageous because you can really look at companies that feel like they're weathering the storms and are going to come out on top. For folks who care very much about crypto and worry very much that this isn't something that can truly replace currency. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
Too many things happen. There are hackers. What do you think?
I think I look at it in a few perspectives, and to address the perception of the public, and think this seems like a lot of scam and hacking, and
Yeah.
how come there are so many $1 million loss? And it certainly happened because in some sense, because the industry is quite early. So to remember from the Web 1 day, right? The video, internet started really in the porn industry, because there's need on the video side of things, and it's not all kosher, but in some sense,
Got a lot of attention though.
that's right. And I don't want to go there for far rabbit hole, but in some sense, when there's certain use case, you have to really think about bandwidth, scalability, and I think the essence of the industry at the beginning, because it is at the beginning is a Wild West, but I think the good thing is, as we're seeing earlier this year, I think the Biden administration from the White House have an executive order and basically encourage all the agencies to set up rules. And in some sense, to me, is a really good sign. Means typical America, right? You're going to have some lawsuit, you're going to have some fight, and both Coinbase and FTX are lobbying heavily in Washington D.C.
Yeah,
I think it's a good sign because the chaos will happen. But meanwhile, it takes time, months and years, to get to a place where there's a regulatory framework. So on the trading side of things, is slowly getting there. And then on top of that, companies like I call them the financial oligarch, from the Goldman Sachs or the JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley.
Right.
All of them have one way or the other a Bitcoin ETF or some financial product now.
And how much do you work with these oligarchs? Regularly, if at all?
Not really. Because for us, we actually don't want to get in this whole conversation of regulatory or anything but to do with.
Sure.
Have a lot to do with because I feel like, don't get me wrong, we're very supportive of regulatory and have the legislation around us. I think it's a must, in fact. Having said that, what I want to focus our energy on is really still the technical infrastructure of things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we try to encourage all our teams and our founders, look, it does seem depressing. And I'm sure that it's true for Web2 founders as well, because the public market looks so bad.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we are so early, so therefore, let's get back to work. Let's focus on the tech. We're missing all these things. Even let's say if you think about on Amazon or cloud, any sort of cloud services, there is from communication to error handling to all these there's so much stuff need to storage, all these stuff need to be built. They're not really 100% there yet, and that's what we should focus on.
Right.
But industry as a whole, from government agencies to financial oligarch, they're all dabbling and tiptoeing. And that to me are all good sign because it's an asset class here to stay.
And at the same time, how do you make sure that regulation that has something to do with the Web 2 world or earlier doesn't affect your companies that you care about and are actively participating in?
Yeah, I think right now it's still particular Web 2 with a lot of regulations. When most of these older regulations, when they were created, there's no crypto, right? That's why right now, even which token belongs to a security, which token really is a commodity or a currency, we don't even know yet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debate around this. I'm not a regulation or I'm not a lawyer, so I'm so not qualified. But I'm just glad that as an industry, we're getting so much attention. And sometimes I half joke that anything the Chinese government want to block probably is a thing.
Is it a good thing? Or at least a thing that people care about?
It's a thing that people care about,
Yeah.
and it's an industry to stay.
Sure.
And you see such a big contrast between what China is doing versus the US and the rest of the world. Not let alone the Singapore or the UAE of the world, very welcoming in terms of sort of Web3 and crypto founders and investors. So you definitely see very interesting dynamic worldwide and how they are sort of facing this industry.
Okay, so let's talk about, because you brought up China versus the U.S. and some other areas of the world where the U.S. is, many would say, lagging behind. Digital currency hasn't worked for us. Many other countries have tried it.
Yep.
China is arguably, the strongest market where, the idea of sending and receiving money digitally has been part of life for a long time.
Yes.
So what's going on here? What's the U.S. missing?
I think I said it publicly many times. If you want to see the future of digital currency, not crypto, but just mobile payment and digital currency, it's already there. You just need to go to China, except we can't go right now with the quarantine, so forget that. But when you get the chance to go, and I'm welcome to host you, really is like the combined, there's two major platforms. One is Ant Financials, which is part of Alibaba, and the key app that they use is Alipay, and Tencent, which is the platform that runs WeChat. Sure. WeChat is the #1 chat app, just like the WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger in the US.
It's the super app.
It's the super app. Yeah. Everyone has WeChat. Actually, most of my friends don't even want to talk to me.
If it's not on WeChat. Yeah, because it's
completely different. They don't use email. All business conversation happen on WeChat. So as part of WeChat, that's WeChat Pay. The combined user base of the two apps is over 1 billion. This is 3 times of the population of the US. And this actually started, and by the way, I don't want to go into the weed of too much history, but before even have WeChat, Tencent have another messenger called QQ. And this, within QQ, they have this Q currency. It's called QB. And the Q currency, this is like more than 15 years ago. The user can actually go to the Bank of China, deposit real RMB, and to get deposited their Q currency in the app.
Wow.
This
15 years ago?
More than 15 years ago.
No, I mean, so, I never heard of this.
It's so interesting. And when that happened, I think you can probably Google online. And in fact, the Chinese government at the time was like, wait a second, what is this Q currency?
Yeah.
It cannot be a dominant currency.
Sure.
I think at the time, probably the QQ Messenger was maybe 200, 300 million user, also huge. Yeah. A lot of people were using it buying virtual goods. So, but the Chinese government was like, okay, we need to monitor and we need to have control of this. So this happened before. This is nothing new in terms of sort of the digital realm in China. So because of that history, when crypto first started, and in 2017, 2018, China really was the center of the universe of Bitcoin mining.
Yes.
Bitmain, WhatsMiner, Canaan actually went public. These are all sort of the largest Bitcoin miner hardware company. Right? Yeah. Tons of mining farm in China.
And this is before people even understood Bitcoin mining and started to think about impact on the global carbon footprints and all of that stuff.
Yeah, no clue, because it's so new.
Yeah.
They can't even spell crypto, okay? and if you also think about flashback, Binance, Huobi, OKEX, many of these are actually started in China. But now they cannot serve Chinese citizens. So there's a lot of talent in that world. They understand digital currency. They know how to drive adoption, because you don't need to teach them to pay with your app or your super app.
Right.
So basically, when Chinese government decide to push the DCEP, which is basically the virtual RMB, it really didn't take that long. It's just a matter of partnering with Alipay and WeChat Pay. And they've been testing in different cities within China. And they also get, I think I read, although I haven't been back for 3 years now, but before I left, they started testing in Shenzhen or Suzhou in certain merchants. So you can probably buy a cup of coffee using your virtual RMB in the Starbucks now. And that is amazing if you think about it. We in the US probably will take some time to get to that point.
Well, okay, so that's exactly where I was going. If we think about, what is a super app in the US? I mean, you got Meta. Meta tries to be a super app, works at some things, doesn't work that well at others.
Yeah.
That would be probably my first guess. I mean, is there another company that you say, they're poised to be the WeChat of the US? Plenty of people in the US use WeChat, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I think it's so I wish the Libra project under Meta worked out. I really love the ideal that at the time that Meta and Facebook had to paint the picture where I don't know what's the user count now, at least 2 or 3 billion.
Sure.
That is on Facebook.
I think it's 3 billion.
Yeah, and they would have a chance. just at least on the user base, it's already there. So if you launch payment, why wouldn't I just use, maybe Messenger or maybe Facebook to start paying for that? And plus, particularly there's Facebook business page. A lot of business already on there. But unfortunately, I think like the way that was being rolled out was sort of, we will go conquer the world. And it got a lot of government, and this is not China or not, like Southeast Asia, Europe, Middle East, many of the government agency was actually quite upset. I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to launch, Facebook is not a central bank. So it got a little bit more sensitive, unfortunately. But I think Facebook have a huge chance. I think WhatsApp still is very, very popular worldwide.
Well, and I think Facebook has been, spending a lot of time the last couple of years trying to dismantle this idea that, it's too strong, it's too powerful, it's too, influential in good ways and bad ways.
Yep.
And kind of remains to be seen how that will shake out. But, they're certainly... They've got the user base.
Yes.
So there's that.
Yeah. And then the way that I look at it, although, TBD how it's all going to turn out, I was looking at some study this morning. I think the number one country in terms of crypto adoption is India.
Yeah.
And then I think, don't quote me on it, I'm pretty sure if not number one, but definitely top three, India is also WhatsApp in terms of user base. So they could have been able to kind of be able to marry the two and really drive adoption.
Yeah.
But I think the American way of, go conquer the world probably is not the way to go. It really should be country by country. And in fact, getting like the individual country's support is key. Why not? I do think that all the governments actually would want it to support. But of course, not everyone wants to go through all the lobbying and what we're going through in the US right now. It does take some time.
So looking forward at Raise Capital, do you have any companies that are on the horizon that people may not know about yet that you think might be the future of crypto and or everything?
There's so many. We have so many.
Just give me one. Give me two.
As I mentioned, we're really into the infrastructure of things. So we have seen really interesting layer one from the Solana, Ethereum, and others. But we're now looking at sort of the next level platform as a service for developers. For example, Notify, which is a Paul Kim. Paul is previously spent time at Oracle, old school Web 2 companies. And also has Circle and all that. Now working on Notify is basically Twilio for Web 3. So if you think about it, which is so interesting because our previous conversation is about payment app and communication. But if you think about it today, Web 3, because somehow, in some sense, we also want to protect our identity, right?
Yeah.
So the entry point, the wallet actually is the entry point. In fact, the wallet these days are almost like the Facebook Connect to entry point for many of these protocols, but you don't know exactly who they are.
Sure.
So imagine, let's say I'm using my Phantom wallet and to buy an NFT on...
Like that would be my MetaMask, for example.
Exactly. MetaMask to OpenSea or Phantom to Magic Eden.
Yeah.
And you bid on something and you keep checking in or you are trading some crazy option and then shit, like the contract expired. You have no idea. And so Notify is actually working with all these different protocols.
It's the layer to keep you informed.
That's right. And to keep you informed, well, if it's MetaMask and you don't have your laptop open all the time to like do the push on Chrome.
Yeah.
But so they build it in with the protocol where they can push you email or text or SMS, whatever channel that you want. But working very closely with the developers. That actually makes sense to me. And this is not something where and plus the event that need to get push notification, it could be defined by the developers. Or actually it should be defined by the user. When Bitcoin dropped below this price.
Defined by the user and then fixed by the developers.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Or now, at least now as a user, you now know when to go back to open sea and say, oh my God, like it's 5 more minutes and maybe you bid up the price or whatever you wanted to do. This is just sort of like almost user experience 101 in the normal world, but that's so not the case in Web3.
Right.
And so Notify is solving a real pain point, and many of the developers that they're working with completely understand what it is, and it's very simple, but yet it is missing in Web3.
I would say the number one thing, I understand crypto up to a certain point. I spend a lot of time trying to understand it because I have to talk about it. You work in it very directly. I would say the number one thing that people who know more about it than me say is, still the Wild West. And that's even a term that you used earlier. Just the Wild West. We don't really have, there are a lot of companies trying to do stuff, but it's not a seamless experience. You kind of have to know what you're doing. And so I think that when we hear a lot of the stuff about like, ooh, crypto downturn, ooh, people lost a lot of money, ooh, hackers stole a lot of money, from some wallet that wasn't secure, folks that are very smart and should know more about this just don't understand it because we don't have these rules in place where everybody is adhering to.
Yeah, and rules is slowly getting there, and yes, the experience is definitely missing. My number one encouragement, even to my mother, is, you know what, it is harder to understand, but once, at least just keep all our minds open. Early days in Web 1 and Web 2 is very clunky. But when things, my biggest, irony being particularly investing in early stage. When I first started, in my head, I'm like, well, worst case scenario, I can help build it.
You're right.
And sometimes, even though I came from an engineering background, all these amazing founders, sometimes I'm like, what are they talking about? The first time I listened to Vitalik talk about Ethereum, I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. And I love it. I love it. Like Merkle tree and this, and I'm like, what?
Yes,
and
what are you talking about?
But I think that the irony is that particularly with early stage, if I understand 100%, I probably should not invest.
Really?
Because it's something is already so well understood. Why would an early stage, just like, why would I invest in another Facebook today or another WhatsApp? Because these are things that's already established, they are actually for later stage investor.
I see.
Earlier investor, the key thing is,
would you consider those companies clones that just you need to find the next thing?
That's why I think sometimes we cannot actually even say I'm going to build. It's kind of ironic to me, building a Facebook for Web3. That is oxymoron. Like, what?
Yeah. What do you get out of it?
No, I think every single new things are actually new experience that we can't imagine or experience before. Is never about a 20% increase in terms of experience. Is 100% different experience. So, and things that we never seen before. So the most important thing for us as an investor, or I'm sure you experience that, Sarah, as a journalist, where I don't know what you're talking about, but we need to keep our minds open, because then we're not investing or defining or covering on things that is about the future. We're about the past.
Right.
Trying to be hip and cool and never work that way.
You're kind of speaking out loud what you already know, and you're not really contributing to the furthering of anything.
Yeah, and sometimes I think the young founders, that's why they are not very comfortable with, a lot of our regulator tends to be older generation, and they have a different kind of lens because things are work this way. And I'm not saying like the new generation is all about being new or rebellious, but sometimes you do need to take a fresh eyes to build something brand new.
So looking ahead, I know it's a little trite to say, where do you see tech in 5 years? But if you had to guess, where do you think we're going to be in the next decade?
So many things. I think early this year I saw like a report about a crypto user about 200, 300 million worldwide. And I think, I don't know, by end of next year, hopefully more than 1 billion. And 5 years from now, more than 2 billion. I think internet users, maybe 5, 6 not 100% yet, but it's getting there. And I really, really think that hopefully by the time there's no like China, US, all these crazy war, we don't necessarily like look at this is from that country or that country.
Right.
And every single country have the same respect for data privacy and have respect of how you should monetize your data. And the concept of crypto is really about, Web3 is actually about ownership, where we own our own data. And the token part of it is basically is enabler. And that's why in many senses, the reverse of going public but being so early, because from day one, the users, the consumer felt like they're part of it because they own a piece of that token of that network.
Yeah.
That's why we're able to grow so fast in such a short time. In some sense, thanks to Meta, because that really is a movement. Not just for the trading part of it, it's really a movement of why there's such a force to drive the adoption of crypto because of ownership of everything that we own.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it possibly being something that is a little bit less of a, nationalistic, here's how we do it here, here's how they do it there, we can't all agree, big government is worried about, the uprising of alternative currencies. Sounds like you feel pretty optimistic about how we might be in a few years.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I'm Chinese. I'm born and raised in Hong Kong. I'm sitting with you here. I actually think that more and more, almost 100% of our now how many 30 or 35 portfolio companies, 100% of them are distributed. They may say they're Silicon Valley companies, but they have team everywhere.
Sure.
So we better...
It's already global.
Yeah, it's already global, and we better keep our mind open because we obviously have companies with team members sitting in India, sitting in Europe, sitting in Dubai and Hong Kong and China, everywhere. So I'm just so excited that hopefully many of these audience worldwide will get to see our conversation, because when we get there, we're like friends.
Yeah.
When we arrive.
Me too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Edith, thank you so much for sitting down with us. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sarah. Glad to be here.